Okay, Blake, you really enjoy reading, don't you?
Certain books.
And what is one author we were talking about yesterday?
Alexander Dumas.
And what has he written?
He's written The Three Musketeers, The Man in the Iron Mask, and The Count of Monte Cristo.
And tell me something about Alexander Dumas.
His father was a close companion and general of Napoleon, and Alexander himself. The only stories he's known to have written were those three I just mentioned, and he became rich from his novels.
Dad is here.
He became rich from his novels, but he spent so freely that he died penniless, and also turns out he wanted for. Also turns out, like the Count of Monte Cristo, and he dreamed of revenge on the critics who had attacked him, and in The Three Musketeers, a young man named D'Artagnan comes to Paris from Gascony, and he comes there to join the King's Musketeers and picks a fight with an evil man named Rochefort, who turns out to be a murderous spy of Cardinal Richelieu, and they find out that an evil woman named Milady de Winter, whose real name is Charlotte de Bue, had once married D'Artagnan's friend, one of the musketeers named Athos, and after D'Artagnan fights a duel with Rochefort and kills him, then they have Milady executed for so many murders that she's committed, as well as the crime of stealing sacred treasures from the sanctuary. And 20 years later, in Man in the Iron Mask, both D'Artagnan and his friends are still around. D'Artagnan is now a captain of the King's Musketeers. Porthos has married a rich widow. Athos has retired to the country, and Aramis has become an archbishop. And then Aramis plots to put King Louis XIV's twin brother Philippe on the throne, but the plot is discovered, and he and Porthos are exiled. Eventually Porthos dies from a cave-in, and I don't know how, but poor Athos dies, and Aramis flees into exile, but says goodbye to D'Artagnan one last time before D'Artagnan is killed in a war. And in The Count of Monte Cristo, Edmond Dantes comes home on the Pharaon, a ship bound for Marseille, and his employer, Monsieur Morel, appoints him captain of the Pharaon, but an evil sailor on board named Philippe Danglars, wants to be captain, mainly because of the increase of salary that went with it. Edmond goes to his apartment where he is embraced by his aged father, old Monsieur Dantes, and soon he goes to his girlfriend Mercedes, whose evil cousin Fernand wants her for himself, and both Fernand and Danglars write a letter to the king's chief prosecutor, and Edmond is arrested, and then the prosecutor's assistant, Monsieur Gerard Villefort, finds out that the letter that Edmond has with him is written from Napoleon to Villefort's father, Noirtier, and then Villefort burns the letter and has Edmond imprisoned for life in prison. Edmond spends 14 years in prison until he meets one of the other prisoners who's been digging his way towards the outer wall, but mistakenly goes to Edmond's cell, and he introduces himself as the Abbé Faria. He's probably 75 years old, or 65, but either way he's old enough to be Edmond's father, and he comes to love Edmond as one of his own sons, and through the years that follow, he teaches Edmond how to read, write, and up till now Edmond's education has only been towards the matters of the sea and sailing, and thanks to the old man, he's now an educated gentleman, and he realizes that the minds of some men work in evil ways. and he starts to suspect that Bernard and Danglars were responsible for his imprisonment, but he still cannot figure out why Villefort put him away forever when suddenly the old man tells him the name of the person it was addressed to, Norateur, and he says to him, he is Villefort's father, whom he is so ashamed of that he uses his mother's family name. And then Edmond and the priest dig their way towards the outer wall, and suddenly the priest falls ill, and Edmond drags him back to his cell, and then the dying old man says to him that the treasure of Cardinal Enrique Spada is buried on the Isle of Monte Cristo, and that night the abbe dies in front of Edmond, who grieves for his friend, and then Edmond waits till after the guards have left the room after sewing up Varia's body in a cloth, and then he goes back there, opens the cloth, removes the corpse, and sews himself up in there as the soldiers take him out. He believes they're gonna bury him, but then they tie a large stone to his ankles and throw the body over the edge of a cliff into the ocean. Edmond draws his knife and cuts his way out and cuts the rope and then swims for his life. The next morning he's picked up by smugglers and befriended by one of them by the name of Jacopo. And then they go to the Isle of Monte Cristo, where he only gets 5 diamonds and hides them in his pocket, and then he and Jacopo leave the crew and head for Marseille, where they trade the crystals in for a fortune, and then he has the rest of the treasure moved from Monte Cristo. Then he goes to Paris, where Danglars and Villefort now live as the co-owners of the largest bank in Paris. And then Danglars is always shrewd, and though he's now among the richest of men in Paris, his passion is still to have more money. Greed. And then, as for Villefort, though rich, he has some misfortunes personally. His first wife, Renée, had died, and his second wife was highly nervous and terrified of poverty. They had been childless for many years, but now had a son, Edward, for whom both parents would gladly have died, and the Count goes into business with them, with both Danglars and Villefort, and he tells them about a diamond mine, but as the days go by, ships are wrecked, and some are attacked by smugglers, and men trusted with transporting cash have disappeared with them, and finally the report comes in the diamond mine is a fraud. Then, shocked by his ruin, Danglars takes what he has left and flees from Paris, and when Villefort finds out about it, then he's eager enough to ask for his old position as chief prosecutor again, and he said he would work hard to regain his family's position in life, but when his wife finds out about this, she writes him a note that says, "I am sorry. I must take Edward where he will be safe forever. The protection for both he and I no longer resides in your house." And Villefort finds his wife and son dead, both poisoned. And then he says to the Count of Monte Cristo, whom Edmond has taken the name of, "You are the instrument of the devil," and Edmond responds, "No, I am the instrument of your own past evil. Look at me, Villefort. See if you can trace the face of a sailor whom you betrayed with kind words and a friendly smile." And Villefort says, "No, it cannot be. No, you cannot be." He could not go on. "Yes, I am Edmond Dantes, and you deserve your fate." Then Villefort went crazy and said, "Yes, I deserve my fate, but they did not." Then Edmond looked at the corpses and said, "No, I had no hatred of them. only you, Villefort. And he says, not Villefort, Norritor, Norritor, Norritor. And then Edmond finds Danglars, who's been taken prisoner by the old smuggling crew, who strip him of his remaining money until Edmond comes in and says, Are you hungry? Yes, I am starving, said Danglars. And Edmond says, I know an old man who's starved because of your evil doing, meaning his father. Do you repent? And Danglars said, I do not know who you mean, but yes, I repent. Edmond threw back his hood and said, I forgive you. And Danglars said, the Count of Monte Cristo. No, sir, I am Edmond Dantes, he responded. And Danglars fell back on his knees and wept bitterly, and Edmond said, give him his remaining money and let him go. I want him out of my life forever. And Paris never heard from Danglars again. And now Edmond's last victim was Fernand. He went to Fernand's place and found Mercedes there with her son Albert. And when... Yes, sir, can we help you?
Immediately?
Yeah.
What about today?
Pardon?
What you talking about today?
All 3 books of Alexander Dumas.
Oh, okay.
And then he exposed Fernand for the murder of Ali Pasha, also known as Ali Turbilin, whom he'd betrayed to the Turks who had killed him, and then he'd taken his fortune and he sold his daughter Haydée for a slave. She testified against him, and Fernand was convicted of felony, treason, and dishonor. Albert was infuriated when he found out the Count had exposed him and challenged him to a duel right there in the opera house. Then, when Edmond got home, he found Mercedes there, who begged him not to kill her son, and he said to her, these phone ringers drive me nuts. Okay, and then somehow Mercedes had recognized him in spite of 14 years going by, and then he told her about what Fernand had done, and she realized this, and she asked, why must this revenge fall on my son as well as Fernand? And he said, I never intended to involve Albert in this. The young man's hot blood did that. But I will do as you ask. I will spare his life. But in return, I will be the one to die. He would sacrifice his own life for this. And then, when Edmond got to the field to duel with him, Albert said to him, in spite of you, however guilty that Fernand might have been, I thought you had no right to punish him. I have since learned that you have that right. My mother told me everything of the betrayal of an innocent young sailor who cannot be spoken of without tears. I only wish I could I forget some of those things he said. But he said, all I can do is humbly beg your pardon, Count. And the Count shook hands with him, and then Albert took him aside and said, my mother once told me you and she were pledged to one another. I can only wish your lives had not been separated. I could have someone in my life I could be proud of. When Edmond got home, Fernand was enraged and said, is this some sport of yours, to track a man down and punish him for his past crimes? What? And to make matters worse, Albert turns against me and apologizes to my enemy. What is this power you have, and why me? You are not the only one I ruined, Fernand. The other 2 I ruined were Danglars and Villefort. They are your associates, I believe. And Fernand said, no, it cannot be. No, Edmond Dantes is dead. And then he fainted. And Edmond said, not dead, but here before you. The Count of Monte Cristo has cut off your life, just as you cut off Edmond Dantes. And when Fernand got home, he saw Mercedes and Albert leaving with with 2 suitcases, and Albert said, "Do not look back, mother. This is no longer our home. Soon you'll be back in Marseille, where you were happy as a girl. I will be off to sea to seek my fortune." As the carriage rounded the corner, a shot rang out from the garden. Bernard Mondego had killed himself, and the Count of Monte Cristo had taken his revenge on the enemies of Edmond Dantes. And later, Edmond boarded a ship to sail away, and he said goodbye to Jacopo, who had tears in his eyes, and said, "My friend, will we ever meet again?" And Edmond said, "My friend, only God knows the future. Until then, all we can do is wait and hope, just as I did for so many years. Wait and hope."
Thank you.
You're welcome.